Hey y'all, I'm Scott Pennyman. I'm sports producer Scott Pennyman here with Brett Gilbert.
What's up?
Brett, how you feeling on a Friday?
On a Friday, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling even better to talk about tonight's topics. Ready to
Oh
talk about
man,
some big basketball games happening tonight, including one right here in Atlanta. And it's a big, 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 big one for the Hawks.
absolutely. Let's get it's Friday, so let's get right to it, man. We got a lot of NBA to talk about.
We
The
do.
Hawks versus the Celtics over at State Farm Arena, Game 3 tonight. I mean, I guess you would say if you're a Hawks fan, if you're on the Hawks team, you would certainly call this a must-win. I mean, make no
Yes.
mistake about it.
Yes.
They're down 2-0 against the Celtics, who are clearly, at least through the first 2 games so far, look like the better team. So if you're the Hawks, if you have any hopes of making this a series whatsoever, you got to get tonight's game, right?
Yeah, you have to. We were just talking about before we went live how no NBA team has ever come back from down 3-0. I definitely don't think the Hawks would be the team to do that. I know we got a lot of Hawks fans in Atlanta, obviously, but I think most of them probably know that this isn't the best looking Hawks team we've seen, and I don't think they're really a match to try to pull off 4 straight against a Celtics team that's coming off of an NBA Finals run and has looked great all year long and in the first 2 games of this series.
No, look, when the NBA season started, the Boston Celtics were my favorite to win the NBA championship. I mean, just coming within 2 games
lot
of
of
getting it
people's.
done last year. Exactly. I mean, I'm not breaking any news here. I mean, the Boston Celtics pretty much have the most solid team all the way around. I mean, you have 2 stars, you have role players who know their role. They pick
Yep.
up Malcolm Brogdon in the offseason. You look at guys like Derek White coming off the bench. First 2 games, he scored 24 points, then 26 points in game 2. I mean, it's just all the way around the board, the Boston Celtics, without question, are better than the Atlanta Hawks. Now, can they make this a series tonight? I think that's the question.
Yeah,
Can the
'cause-
Hawks get one?
Yeah, because if you win one tonight, you're at home. Then you're going into game 4 with the potential to tie, in your home arena. I mean, it's a tall, tall task, like we said, but it's not impossible. What do you think? You're the basketball mind up here. What do
Thank you.
you think the Hawks have to do to pull this off tonight?
I mean, I think it's going to sound basic, but just hit shots, right? I mean, when you look at the first 2 games, Trae Young 14 for 40, first 2 games, 3 for 13 from three-point range. That's not going to get it done. He's the head of the snake. Trae Young needs to come out, be aggressive, be on his game. If he does that, everything else normally follows. I think if Trae Young comes out and he's hitting shots, and more importantly, not just hitting shots, but getting everyone involved too. And I
Yeah.
think that'll happen if he comes out, hit shots, don't force shots. I think the first couple of games, when you look at some of the shots that he took, they're really kind of forced. So I hope he doesn't come out in this game feeling like he's got to score 60 in order for this team to win. I think he needs to come out, just play his game, get other guys involved. They have a lot of good players. The Hawks have a pretty good. Not just a pretty good. The Hawks have a very good roster when you look all the way around. DeJounte Murray, John Collins, Clint Capella, all those
They have
guys
some
can
guys.
play. Yeah, they've got some guys. So I think that if Trae comes out with an offensive mindset, not necessarily coming out looking to shoot or score every time, but if he has an offensive mindset, keeps Boston on their toes, gets his teammates involved, then I think that's going to give the Hawks an opportunity to win. But even if they do all of that, I still think it's going to be hard to get a win tonight.
I was about to say, even if Trey could come out legitimately, Trey could come out and drop 40 tonight, and the Hawks still lose. He could drop 40 and they could lose by 10. I know we're standing up here and this sounds very gloom and doom, but I don't think this is inconsistent from how most Hawks fans are feeling tonight. And if you're Trae Young, I know you said, he doesn't have to he shouldn't try to do too much, but I don't know how you, if you're in that position, talk yourself out of trying to do too much because, like you said, the offense, not the offense, everything runs through Trae Young tonight. So he knows that he has to have a career night to give his team a win, and that's a lot of pressure for one guy.
But make no mistake about it, I think Trae has to be aggressive, but I don't think aggressive always means forcing shots. I think aggressive can mean just always stay on the attack the defense, get to the center of the defense, find shooters, find other scorers. I think the Hawks are at their best when the ball is moving. When they beat the Heat in that playing game, that's what was happening. Trae Young was aggressive, but his aggressiveness allowed other people to get theirs too. It allowed guys like DeJounte Murray, John Collins, Clint Capella had a really good game in that playing game. So I think that when Trae Young is aggressive, that forces the defense to collapse around him, and that gives other guys opportunities. So when I think Trae needs to be aggressive. That's what I mean. I just think he needs to be aggressively attacking the Celtics defense, the center of the Celtics defense, and just giving the shooters around him, Bogdanovich and those guys, opportunities to score. Because I don't care, like you said, Trae can score 40 and they can still lose.
Yeah.
And I think Boston knows that too. So I think they're really fine with Trae trying to do it by himself tonight and get 40, 45 points, because if that happens, like you said, they could still lose.
I think his assists might be more important than his points tonight.
For sure. And I guess that's what I'm getting to. I think that he needs to make the guys around him better. Now, that's something that he really hasn't done probably in a couple of years, is make the guys around him look better. So I think that's a challenge that might be asking Trae Young to do something that maybe he's not capable of. But I think that's what it's going to take to I don't think they're going to win the series, but I think that's what it's going to take for them to get back in the series.
And we can move on from this in a second, because there's just only so many ways you can slice this game. We've seen it twice, but it does almost feel like this is a referendum on Trae's future in Atlanta. There's been rumors swirling for the past month or so that ownership has given the front office a green light to explore trades in the offseason, sending Trae away to get something back to try to retool, rebuild this roster, because the way it's built currently, for whatever reason, is not working. And I saw today an anonymous NBA exec said that the Lakers are looking like favorites to make a trade for Trae Young in the offseason. So maybe even more riding on tonight's game and this series than just the Hawks' finals chances.
Hey, look, I mean, when you make the playoffs a couple years in a row, losing the first round, you have a new head coach, a pretty new general manager, and things keep going the same way, there's going to be changes, right? I mean, I think that's what happens in professional sports. So if they get swept out by Boston or lose 4-1 in this series, I think management has to take a serious look at the direction they're headed in, and I think they want to take a serious look at looking at, can Trae Young be the kind of star who is the best player on a championship team kind of player? I think right now, I think they're kind of up in the air about that. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't rule out an offseason trade for Trae Young, but I don't know, man. I think if you're in a city like Atlanta, it's hard to get superstar players to play there, even though not to Atlanta, but I think the Hawks organization in general, there's not a lot of superstar players to pass through. So I think before you make that move this offseason, you got to be very sure about that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you need to get the right return. You don't need to ship off Trae Young at any cost by any means, if that is a move that they actually explore. We got some other games on tonight as well. Your Cleveland Cavs taking on the New York Knicks tonight, and then we also got the Nuggets taking on the Timberwolves. That Cavs-Knicks series is tied 1-1, going back to going back to New York. And the Denver series, they're up 2-0, and that one is going back to Minnesota. So what are you expecting tonight? I was going to ask which one of these two you're more excited to watch, but I think I know.
Well, yeah, I think just as a basketball fan in general, I think the consensus around the NBA has been that Cavs and Knicks series had the potential to be one of the more fun series, just because you have two very evenly matched teams. You have kind of two teams who kind of, they kind of grinded to get to this position. So, and they're pretty young too. So I think that when you look at the dynamics in this series, I think it has all the makings to continue to be a really fun series, and I think it's going 7.
Yeah, I tend to agree. They're two very evenly matched teams.
Yeah.
It's felt that way pretty much throughout the first two games. I know the first one wasn't that close, but still, they feel like evenly matched teams when you watch them play. On the other hand, the other series has not felt that evenly matched. Maybe the most lopsided series in the first round, the Nuggets and the Timberwolves. I will say I am excited tonight to see – we talked last night how this is kind of a boring series. The Nuggets have a boring style of basketball. I am excited just to watch Anthony Edwards play, just because he's a special player, University of Georgia guy. He had a rough game 1, put up 41 in game 2, back home, hoping he has another big performance tonight, because he's a special young talent in this league, and I am excited to watch him play tonight, even if it comes in another Timberwolves loss.
Well, let me be very clear about the Minnesota Timberwolves, all right? I've talked about them before. I said I've called them the Cleveland Browns of the NBA.
Yeah, you
and
did.
I mean that for a
you
reason.
came at them.
I really did, because when you look at the Minnesota Timberwolves team, just think of how many really great, I guess you could say great players have passed through that organization, from Kevin Garnett, Kevin Love, guys who, multiple-time All-Stars, if not Hall of Famers. Karl-Anthony Towns had a really good career up in Minnesota, and now you have Atlanta native Anthony Edwards there, and to me, he just seems like that's the latest career that they're going to bury up in Minnesota. It just seems
he's
like
he's so young. He's got such a long time ahead.
I know he's young. I just wish he was with a different organization. Like, let me be real, because they're not winners in Minnesota. They're losers. No matter who plays for them, like I said, no matter who gets drafted into a Minnesota Timberwolves uniform, when you get drafted there, when you put that hat on, when you put that jersey on, you're a loser. And that's just what it is when that's just what it is when you join the Timberwolves. So I really wish Anthony Edwards could play for somebody else. I really think if he was in Chicago or some other organization that at least had a level of competency, or Miami, or just somewhere else that had a level of competency, I think I could really enjoy watching Anthony Edwards. But in Minnesota, it just seems like they're wasting his talents, man. It's just, no matter who wears that, current Anthony Towns has been there for like 7 or 8 years, and it just seems like he's just spinning his wheels. He's not any better, in my opinion, than the day he arrived. And I don't want that to be Anthony Edwards.
Hey, they gave the Grizzlies a run for their money last year. I mean, they did come up short in 6 games, I believe, but that was a good hard series. I thought maybe they had turned a corner, but then they lost some guys in the offseason, and then during this season traded some more guys away. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess you're right, because I have no faith that they're going to win this series. In fact, if I had to bet on it, they probably get swept. I don't know. Maybe they win one tonight and then lose in 5. But I don't see any world where they come back and beat Denver, which sucks. Because, like I said, I love watching Edwards play. He's such a fun young player. He's a great guy off the court. But, yeah, he needs either more help there or to go somewhere where he has better help. You're right.
Listen, bro, I have no doubts if him or Karl Anthony Towns are traded this offseason, they'll probably go somewhere and within 1 or 2 years win an NBA championship. I mean, just look at it, right? That's what happened with Kevin Garnett, right? Within 1 year of leaving Minnesota, he was an NBA champion.
Yeah.
Kevin Love, within 2 years of leaving Minnesota, was an NBA champion. So I think when you look at the common denominator there, it's Minnesota. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the cold weather. I don't know if it's just the fact that people don't like living in Minnesota. I don't know what it is, but they breed losers with the Timberwolves. So, yeah, I mean, for Anthony Edwards' sake, he needs to try to do whatever he can to get the hell out of Minnesota as fast as you can, because they're going to stunt your growth.
Is there something? Maybe you're right. Maybe there is something in the water, because the Vikings have kind of had the same problem. Like they're always fine. They're always good. But, yeah, they always fall short. Even when they had the Minneapolis Miracle, they can never – win when it really matters. They can never win the big one. And, their quarterback, Kirk Cousins, is kind of the embodiment of that. So, I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe there is something in the water in Minnesota.
Look, man, they haven't won anything probably since Kirby Puckett was there with the Minnesota Twins, and probably in the early 90s and everything. That's the last time I remember them having a championship-level team. So, yeah, Anthony Edwards is cold. How about this? How about Anthony Edwards straight up for Trae Young? I'm just saying.
I would love Anthony Edwards in Atlanta. I would love that. They probably don't make that trade, because I don't know.
Bring him home.
If that makes a lot of sense for either side, but that would be awesome in Atlanta.
Bring him home.
Moving on, we had some games played last night. Get your reaction on some of these.
Sure.
3 game threes. We had the Sixers beating the Nets to take a 3-0 lead in that series. Probably the funnest series, in my opinion, of the playoffs so far. The Warriors getting a win over the Kings back in Golden State, and then the Suns getting a close win over the Clippers to take a 2-1 series lead there. Did you get a chance to watch all these?
I did, and last night, that Sixers series, remember, last time we were here, I called that series boring, the Sixers and Brooklyn Nets, because we know who's going to win that series. Yeah. We still know who's going to win that series. That
feels a bit like sweep. Denver and Minnesota on the other side.
Right. Yeah. So Philly's going to win that series, make no mistake about it. But last night's game was just kind of crazy because of the ejections that took place. I mean,
oh, my God. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Or the ejections that didn't take place.
Yes, that may be the bigger story. Right. So for those of you who didn't see, Embiid, forgive me, who was it that stepped over him there?
It was Nick Claxton.
Yes, Claxton stepped over after a play at the rim. And as Claxton is stepping over, and he didn't really do like a pronounced like flex on him step over. He kind of just stepped over his legs, and Embiid fully reared his leg back and kicked upwards into his nether regions. No ejection, though.
No. I know Draymond Green was watching that like, really, bro?
I know.
Really? I mean, so I lightly stomp on a guy's chest, and I'm banned for a game, but this guy tries to kick him right between the legs, and they just let it go. That was kind of crazy. And then when James Harden later got ejected,
I was about to get to that, yeah,
for a move that he does all the time. I mean, it was just bizarre. I mean, it's like, I don't know what was wrong with that officiating crew last night in Brooklyn. I don't know, man, because they got both those calls wrong, man. One guy, Embiid, would have been totally justified getting ejected. And I don't know what the hell they were thinking ejecting James Harden. I don't know what they saw, what they think they saw. Come on, man. I mean, look, NBA officials or officials of any sport has to know when people tune in to TNT, when people tune in to whatever network, or when people buy tickets to watch these games, they're not paying that high amount of money or spending their time watching the officials. They don't come there to watch referees. They come there to watch the players play. So let things sort of work themselves out with the players on the court. We don't come to see you affect the ball game. And it just seems like some of these referees are really just showing up thinking that it's about them, and it's not. It's about the players, man.
I mean, we say that, but then on the Embiid one, if there's a time to put yourself in the game and to throw a player out, that was it. I mean, watching the replay, it doesn't get much more obvious. I mean, the Draymond ejection, I think most people have fallen on the side that yeah, Draymond should have been ejected.
For sure.
But that one wasn't even as egregious as the Embiid one to me. The Embiid one, there was no, Draymond was kind of stumbling. He had the argument of, well, that's where my foot landed. Did I put more force?
Right.
Yeah, like we all know he did. But there's no reason for Embiid to be kicking his leg up, especially where he did and with that amount of force. And just a flagrant one, nothing for it.
Look, I mean, as a fan, if I'm watching that game, do I want to see Joel Embiid ejected? No, I want to see the best players on the court.
But you have to protect the players.
Exactly. But I do think if they ejected Joel Embiid in that situation, I wouldn't have had an argument, right? Because I mean, when you watch it, it looks like you can't kick somebody between the legs. Right?
No,
you can't. So
that's the code, right? I mean, these players are always talking about the code. That's got to fall in the code,
right? So that would have been a justified ejection had they thrown. Embiid
and you're in
out
Brooklyn. It's not like you got to worry about Philly fans. You're in Brooklyn,
right? So that would have been a justified ejection had they tossed Embiid out. But then you toss James Harden for a move he makes every time he has the basketball.
Yeah. That one was ridiculous.
I mean, he made a move towards the hoop. The guy goes down and he gets ejected. So once again, I don't know if any refs had money on the game last night or what. I don't know what the hell was going on there. But there is no way James Harden should have been ejected with that move. None. I mean, that was just.
It's a bit of a flop.
You can't do that, man. Come on.
The guy sold it a bit. Bit of a flop.
People don't understand. Like these NBA playoff games are just basketball games, right? It's just guys out there playing basketball. To these guys, it's their livelihood. I mean, if you eject some of these guys and end up losing the series, lives are going to change. Players are going to be traded. Guys aren't going to get, the contracts that they're looking for. There's a lot at stake in these NBA playoff games. Too much at stake for referees to be making these kind of calls, man. Come on, you can't do that.
I agree 100%. Moving on to the other two games last night. Warriors, Steph had a big night. He had 36 in their win over the Kings. I'm excited for that series, man. I think that might be a home team wins until Game 7 type of series. And last night we said, every game's a referendum. After every game, we feel like, oh, well, that's just how the rest of the series is going to go. But after watching last night's game, I feel like Golden State's just going to win their next game in Golden State, that Game 4, even the series up, and then it's going to go back to Sacramento, and then it's a best of 3. This is great basketball. This is exactly what you want in the NBA playoffs. I mean, this feels like a conference finals, and it's in the first round.
Yeah, and when you look at Golden State, they go out there, and they kind of handled them the whole night last night. I mean, there was really not a point in that game when you watched it where you felt like the Kings were going to win. I think pretty much from throughout, you felt like Golden State had a pretty strong handle on that game.
But it was still fun to watch.
It was.
I mean, the crowd, Sabonis getting booed every time he touched the ball.
Right, and it's going to get more fun because Draymond Green is coming back in Game 4.
So I will say, we harp about the refs interjecting themselves in these ejections, whatever. Yeah. And I guess we can all agree that the refs handled it correctly in the Sabonis Draymond incident in Game 2.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
but it does add to the fuel, right? It does. I think there are probably more people that turned on that Game 3 after seeing all these clips on social media of Draymond getting ejected, stomping Sabonis, then barking at Sacramento fans. That does kind of heighten the entertainment aspect of the game a bit. At least it does to me. I'm a guy that's always said, like in the NFL, we find guys for taunting and talking trash. No, encourage that. Is it a great look for the individual player? No, but I think it just makes the product more entertaining. So I'm not condoning, dirty players like plays like 100%. The one Draymond made.
Right.
But the drama that happened after that, I think, does kind of add and fuel the excitement of the series, and it's going to continue to.
Well, I don't mean to be an old school guy here, but let me bring up something old school for a minute. So one of the highest rated times in the history of the NBA, was the mid '90s. Now, obviously, that was fueled because Michael Jordan is one of the greatest superstars ever, if not the greatest superstar ever. But I think when you look at mid '90s basketball, it was those things. I mean, there was a lot of physical play. There was ejections when you watch like the Heat and Knicks back in the day. There was a lot of. I mean, not look. I don't want guys showing up to the arena putting the gloves on.
You don't want Malice in the Palace every night.
No, you don't want that every night. But I think NBA playoff games are much more fun when there's a physical element to them.
For sure.
When the guys on the court, when you feel like, okay, at least for this series, they don't really like each other. So it really feels like a really good rivalry. So that's, as fans, we like that. We like just two talented teams being competitive with one another and just fighting to win these games. So, yeah, I think that is really good for TV ratings. I mean, you don't want to see guys who are nice to each other. You don't want these to play out like regular season games. Everyone shake hands after every play.
No. I want a little bad blood. You know, I want everybody to be cool and friends at the end of the series, but yeah, for those 7 games or however long it goes, yeah, I want a little bad blood in there.
Right. And so, like I said, I remember growing up and watching like those Miami Heat and Knicks battles in the mid '90s, and they were, there were fights, there were ejections, there was all those sort of things. And like you said, that adds a lot of flavor to these playoff series because it piques people's interest. It piques interest of people who maybe ordinarily wouldn't even be into the NBA, but now they're sitting down there watching these games because they're watching the drama, they're watching the arguments, they're watching the pushing and shoving matches. So, yeah, I think that's good for the game. So, look, I'm all for it. Let it happen.
Yeah, and that's a perfect point. We'll move on to the Suns-Clippers game after this. But like you just said, it gets people into it. My brother, he's the definition of a casual NBA fan.
Yeah.
Kind of, keeps up on social media, who's doing good, who's not. He'll see highlights. But he probably tunes into, like, less than a handful of games a year. But he saw the Draymond Green stuff from Game 2, and he was watching Game 3 and into the series now. It does add. It does pull in at least a few new people. But Suns-Clippers, we can talk about that one for a minute. Clippers without Kawhi. Suns got the win by 5 points. Devin Booker went off 45 points for the Suns. What'd you like in that one?
Look, I mean, if Kawhi Leonard and Paul George can't come back in the series, they're dead in the water. I mean, make no mistake about it. I know Russell Westbrook, he's played really well and everything like that. But to me, coming into this series, the drama has just died with Kawhi Leonard getting hurt. I mean, Kawhi going down just changed everything for me. I felt like even if it was just Kawhi, even without Paul George, I felt like with Kawhi Leonard, from a basketball standpoint, talent-wise, is good enough to win that series pretty much on his own talent and ability. So I felt like the Suns may have been in trouble if Kawhi was healthy, but come on, man. Kawhi can't even make it through. Well, first, and I went through this yesterday. I mean, so this guy load manages every year with the whole purpose of being at his best come playoff time. So now we get to the playoffs, and he's hurt. So it's like, what did you do all the load management for? Like, this is kind of crazy. And that injury has really just ruined this series for me. I mean, just when you look at it now, they have no chance. If Kawhi doesn't come back, if Paul George doesn't come back, they have no chance.
They kept it close last night, though. It's a 5-point game.
They did. And
you don't think they could sneak one out in Game 4?
Well, I think they keep it close because Ty Lue is one of the best coaches in basketball. Russell Westbrook is doing a good job for them. So, yeah, I think Ty Lue's coaching ability, he's a good enough coach to be able to keep that series and keep these games close. But he's got to be depressed right now just because, I mean, he came there to coach Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and it's just he's never had them really in the playoffs, So it's really just disappointing when you look at the Clippers just for the last 3 or 4 years. They've just never been able to get right, man.
Yeah, and I too feel the Suns are going to take that series, honestly, regardless of Kawhi. I think it'll be fun, but I just think there's too much firepower there in Phoenix to overcome. But I don't know. I hope it turns into a good series. We do need to move on to our fourth topic here tonight. 5 NFL players suspended for gambling. Shades of Calvin Ridley all over again. He was suspended 2 years ago. I believe it was 2 years ago now, for gambling while he was hurt or away for some off the field issues, some personal issues. Placed a few bets and ended up getting a 1-year suspension for it. Now he's down in Jacksonville, and now it's kind of played out again. And I took some notes here because it's a lot to go through, and I want to make sure we get it right for you. 4 Lions caught up in this, 3 receivers. So receiver Quintez Cephas, receiver Jamison Williams, first-round pick from Alabama, big name. Receiver Stanley Berryhill, and then Lions safety C.J. Moore, all caught up in this. Cephas and Moore both got indefinite suspensions. So the way that's going to work, from what I was reading earlier from the NFL release, is they can appeal after a year. So it's not technically a year suspension. I believe this is the same way it was handled with Ridley as well. It's technically an indefinite suspension, but then you can ask to be reinstated after a year, effectively making it a year-long suspension, I guess, unless anything else comes out in that time frame. And then a Washington Commanders defensive end, Shaka Toney, also given the same indefinite suspension. Jameson Williams and Stanley Berryhill, though, they were not given the indefinite suspension. They were giving 6 games apiece. And the reason for the difference there is the other 3, Cephas Moore and Toney, they all bet on NFL games during the 2022 season. None of their own teams. It had nothing to do with insider info, but they did bet on games happening in the league that they played in. Whereas Williams and Berryhill bet on college games, which is allowed by the NFL Code of Conduct for players, but they bet on it while at the Lions team facility, so on NFL property. Therefore, in the rules, that's not okay. But instead of getting the full season, they get 6 games. So, yeah, it's a lot to unpack there. Yeah. But what are your thoughts? I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing, right, that after these guys have seen it happen to Calvin Ridley, here we are again.
Well, I think either one or two things are going to have to happen, right? I mean, I think that the more and more gambling becomes prevalent and easier, through apps like FanDuel and all that stuff, I mean – I'm not the biggest. I'm not a gambler at all, right? So I mean, I'm not up to date on all the gambling lingo, but I just know
I got you. I can help you out there.
But no, it's fine. But it just seems kind of crazy. Like at some point, the NFL may have to walk back their stance a little bit when it comes to some of these things, right? Because it's becoming very prevalent among players to place these bets, and pretty soon you're going to be suspending half the league, right? So I think there needs to be some compromise at some point when the next labor negotiations happen or when something happens to where, yeah, I mean, I get it. You don't want gambling. You don't want players gambling in games that they're playing in because that cuts at the integrity of the league. You don't know who they're betting on and what, kind of plays they could be doing in that game or, what do we call that back in, point shaving, any of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, you don't want those things happening because if that starts happening, we're going to look at the NFL as if it's like the WWE, like it's some scripted drama, right? So I understand why you can't have that, but some of these rules I think are borderline, kind of touchy, kind of maybe a little bit ridiculous. I mean, if they're, I don't know. It seems.
I
I
tend to disagree just because if you're the NFL, you can't allow a gray area here, right? Like you said, the entire integrity of the league is at stake.
Yeah.
So I think that these suspensions, just like the Ridley ones, they are to make an example. They are to send a message. Look, you cannot be betting. It's crazy that people were still betting on NFL games because that's exactly what happened to Ridley. Right. But also, you can't even be messing around on these FanDuel apps, these DraftKings apps, while you're at work, while you're here in the Lions team facility. If you want to go bet on some college games at home, go ahead. But do not touch NFL games and do not bet on anything while you're in an NFL facility. And I think the NFL is right in that. And I don't often agree with Roger and the NFL front office, but I think this is an area where there cannot be, this weird gray zone. Well, that's okay, but that one's a little different. No, it's got to be black and white, no gambling. That's it. Scott, we're running out of time here. We need to wrap up quickly, so we'll move on. What's on your mind tonight, man?
Not a whole lot. I'm just excited, of course, about, like I said yesterday, about the NFL draft. Lots of intriguing storylines coming up. It's just going to be really interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah.
How about you?
I'm excited for this Braves-Astros series, little World Series rematch tonight over there happening in the Battery. Some good baseball. Fernando Tatis made his season debut.
That's cool. I'm glad he's back.
Yeah, in San Diego last night. Went 0 for 5 with 2 strikeouts, so not the best debut. But Padres got the win. That's baseball. He could have 3 hits tonight.
It's all good.
I'm excited for some good baseball, and we'll see hopefully some good basketball tonight. Cool, we'll see you guys back here Monday night.
Later.
See ya.